They're part of the family just like every one of us is, so they're not just animals. They're police officers too.
Yeah, some tough stuff here new at 5. A Fort Gibson K-9 officer taking his final ride.
News on 6's _pai is on the story with how law enforcement agencies from across Green Country came together to honor a hero.
Officer Brent Maddox and his family have years of memories with Boss. They tell me he was great with kids, but he was also a criminal's worst nightmare. They spent today making sure Boss was surrounded by love up until his last breath.
Officer Boss, you could get 5-10, 10-7 for the last time.
12-year-old Boss took his last breaths today, wrapped in an American flag, boldly showcasing a thin blue line.
He was a police officer just like all of us. He did his job without question.
Just an hour before his final moments, Boss was in the backyard, soaking in the sun, surrounded by some of his favorite people.
He had a beer this morning. He ate his treats.
Boss was a K-9 officer with Fort Gibson Police for a little over 7 years.
Just depending on whatever I had in store for him that day, he would rise to the occasion every time.
In his prime, Officer Maddox says Boss was tough and relentless, but his hip dysplasia eventually became too painful to continue working.
He'd go to work today if he could.
Even after he retired, he stayed in the family.
My daughter grew up with him.
Today, the law enforcement community came together to make one last memory with Boss, to take a moment and honor him for all he's given the Fort Gibson community. This was Boss's last ride. He was so weak, officers had to carry him into the vet on a blanket, staying by his side until he took his last breath.
He earned it. Then and back.
On the scene, on the story in Fort Gibson, _pai, News on 6.